everyone, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching the Broken Meeple. This is a YouTube channel about board games where I give reviews, top 10s and my honest opinions, regardless of the consequences.
Get on with it.
So today I'm doing a review of a copy of a game I picked up at the UK Games Expo. Now the review copy, I paid my own money for this one, and this is a stock market game.
Right.
Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Luke, this is not really your genre, is it? Well, you're correct, it's not. I don't typically go for stock market economic games. I'm an accountant. Last thing I want to do is work. But I do like stock market games when they're light and simple and don't get too drawn up in dividends and all the like. So Stockpile I really enjoy. Airlines Europe I really enjoy. So it's not that, you know, what's another? Whistle Stop. I like all three of them and they involve shares in some respect. It's just when you start getting to the really heavy stuff where it's all bloated and drawn out and it literally does feel like I'm doing a job, then I start disliking it. But this is another one that I was tempted by, mainly because this is a reprint of an older game. And certainly I'm not necessarily cold to the old, but I'm definitely leaning more towards some of these older games as these newer games come out that just don't seem to invent anything with the wheel or just rehash the same old stuff or just don't innovate whatsoever. This is based on a game called, well, this is the game, sorry, Haben Gut. Haben Gut. It came out in about 2008, I believe, even though it was only in German. This is an English reissue of it from Ares Games, and for a simple, light, streamlined game, I figured I wanted to at least give it a try. So in Haben Gut, the rich and the good, as it's also called, firstly, you have a board full of the stock market prices. So this is basically a tracker for your stock market counters, which are represented by these cool little beakers here. These are positioned on the track and they show the prices. So you buy, and the premise of the game is basically have the most money at the end. So you obviously want to buy low, sell high. These prices will go up and down during the game and you're obviously trying to make a profit. That's the gist of what you're doing. But there's a couple of twists here. Firstly, you have these cards that you will select from. So after you've decided which shares you want to buy and sell, you then have to decide which cards from a display in front of you, well, I say in front of you, in between you and your neighbors basically, which cards you want to pull in order to adjust the stock market. So these cards range from +246 to -246 and they come in the different commodities. So you might decide, right, well, I've already bought 3 shares in red at a low price. So do I have a high red here? Yes, I do. I have a +4 red here. So I'm going to take this card and adjust the price up. Therefore, I make a profit. You have to take one card from your left and your right neighbor. One of them you must apply its effect in full. The other one you only do by half. So you could take a -6 and make it only a -3 in order to mitigate the damage, or you might take a +6 in full to really jack up that price. But eventually in a round, all of these cards will be gone and you rinse and repeat for another round. But there's one added little twist here, because otherwise that would sound pretty generic and boring. Here's where it gets a little bit more exciting, or a little bit more tense, shall we say. As you get these shares, once every turn, you only get 4 turns in a round, you have the opportunity to donate a share to charity. So you have a little board here and you can basically say, well, I bought some salt this round, I'm going to put one in there for charity. Why exactly is that important? Well, in this game, it's one thing to be rich, it's another thing to be good and respected. Because at the end of the round, these charity shares will sell at their prices and everybody will know how much everybody's donated to charity. In the second round, the same thing happens again and it's totaled up. Whoever has donated the least amount of money to charity, i.e. is the most stingiest or the most Scrooge-like, is eliminated from the game. They don't even count up their points.
And it's gone.
Remember games like Cleopatra with the crocodiles and the corruption, or High Society, when you spend too much you're automatically eliminated? It's the same mechanic and I love that mechanic.
So you get nothing! You lose! Good day, sir!
Now, the rulebook in this is dirt simple. I mean, this is your rulebook. There you go. That is literally it. And one page of that is set up. So you have 2 pages, not even that, 2.5 really, because the rest is a 2-player variant, which this game isn't really one I would play with 2 players, honestly. But yeah, you got a page and a half of rules. That's it. And yet somehow, when this was demoed to me at the Games Expo, they managed to get half the rules wrong.
I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Seriously, publishers, sort out your demoers and get them to learn their rules in advance. But this is such a simple game. This is gateway level rule set. There's nothing complicated in here. There is nothing fiddly at all. The only mild annoyance is that you have to remember to pass this starting player marker around after everybody's had 1 turn. That's easy to forget, but you know, that's a minor nitpick. Everything else in here is so simple. Components wise, it's a big box for what you get in the box, but everything is stored nicely. I like these pieces, you know, they're clearly defined and they sit on the spaces a little bit overlapping, but as long as you don't jostle the board around, you're okay. However, if you're colorblind, this might cause a bit of a problem, because yes, you can see which row that is by symbol, but unless you're going to constantly follow, you know, the marker all the way back to the side like this, the color blindness might get in the way, but no, not to a crazy extent. You do have paper money though, and yes, paper money is a pretty low quality way of doing things. I've played this with poker chips on the side and it works just as well. Although this is not bad poker money, it's got some cool illustrations on it and it's, you know, it's paper money, it's what you'd expect. What I tend to do is that because you have to work out what your charity owes, I tend to put the charity money as the paper money and use my poker chips as your own personal money, and it seems to differentiate it quite well. And then you've got little standees to hold the cards. The cards are decent quality. You do not need to sleeve these at all. They're pretty sturdy, they will not scuff, and you won't have to worry about that aspect during the game. And the boards, nice chunky board, and that's kind of mostly it. The artwork is done by Michael Menzel, so the artwork, what there is of it, there's not a huge amount of it, is really beautiful and really nice, and the game just pops color-wise on the table because of these markers and the way that the board looks. It's just a nice, fairly cheap package. I bought this for, what, that mid £30, and that was at the UK Games Expo, so it could even sell for cheaper than that perhaps if you bought it online after the fact. But even then, that's not a bad price for a game these days when pretty much everything wants to be at least £40 plus and doesn't give you stuff that looks or feels as nice as this. But of course, what's the gameplay like? The gameplay is pretty solid. Now, you can play this with up to 5 players. I'm not as keen on playing it with a full count of 5, but it does work at 5. You know, it's not a bad game at 5. It just means that you've got a little bit of downtime between your next turn as people are figuring out what they want to do, and probably a little bit more chaos thrown in. There is a 2-player variant in the rulebook. I don't think this works at 2 either. This is honestly really a 3 or 4 player game. Really good at 4. 4 is like an optimal player count for this, but it works at 3 just fine. I've played good games of this at 3, and 5 is fine. You just got to accept it's going to go on a little bit longer, although it's not that long. You can get a game of this done in an hour. You know, maybe slightly longer with a 5-player game, but you are not talking a long length of time for this, so it doesn't feel like it outstays its welcome at all, which I've been constantly going on about that with games like 3 Hour Euros about outstaying their welcome and like, this is a multiplayer solitaire game and, you know, why do I play this for 3 hours when it should only take 60 minutes? Well, this one takes 60 minutes and honestly I couldn't see it going much longer than that. It really is a quick, snappy game. Although snappy depends on players. You do get some players who play this and spend ages trying to figure out which of the 2 cards they want to do or whether they want to buy and sell. There is some analysis paralysis proneness here, but that's more on the player than the game, because honestly, if I'm playing this, I tend to have reasonably quick, snappy turns. By the time it gets round to me, I'm thinking, yeah, unless the markers have changed drastically before my turn, I've got some idea what I'd like to buy. You've only got a limited amount of money in the game anyway, and your options dwindle as the round goes on, so there's less cards to have to consider. The turn order aspect is a little bit weird in this game though, because you're passing it around at the start of every turn, and depending on the number of players, that can mean that some people go first and last a bit more often than not, because the number of cards that you are given at each round is 8, and this does not change no matter how many players there are. You will always have 8 cards no matter what. So in a 3-player game, obviously first, second, third, and then first again, second, and okay. But then in the 4-player game, obviously that's changed the order somewhat, and in the 5-player game it changes it even again. I don't notice a huge amount of difference really with the turn order. I mean, if you go first, you don't have as much information to go on. If you go last, you don't have as many options to use. But it tends to mitigate itself fairly well, and I've never really had a game where I felt like, oh, if the turn order was slightly different, I would have been fine. Your decisions and your ability to hedge your bets, because you don't have perfect information. Most of these cards aren't in each round. You don't know what some of the information is, because you can only see the displays to either side of you. You can't see the ones further across the table, so you don't have perfect information, and so you have to gamble a little bit. And it can be annoying when you decide, right, I'm going to sell these shares in lumber, but then suddenly somebody then jacks up the price straight after you do that. That's annoying, but then it's also quite fun to do it to someone else when somebody goes, right, I'll buy a bunch of salt and now I've upped the price a little bit. Well, good luck for you, because I've just downed it by 6 and now your salt's a little bit more worthless. There's cool aspects like that. And the charity board, is kind of what sells this game. If you just did the stock market game as its basic thing, it would be pretty boring. The charity board though, where you've only got so many turns in a round in order to say, right, I want to put something on this charity board, so you've only got 4 maximum times you can do it, and you've got to balance between what you want to keep for yourself in order to try and win the game, but also how much you're going to give to charity. Don't forget the prices keep fluctuating, so just because you put a salt share on the charity board when it was nice and high, it might be low by the time it gets around to selling to the charity itself. This is just such a cool thing to mitigate. And I love the fact that when you sell at the end of the first round, you reveal what everybody has donated. So you hear that, right, I'm in the losing run for the charity here, this isn't that good. It pressures people to then put lots into the charity. And it can be very surprising how somebody who had donated the least originally suddenly then donates the most because they go a little bit overboard with the charity. But then that catches some people out because they think, and I've done this before, where I think, oh, after the first round I've donated the most to charity by quite a margin, I'm nice, I'm respected, all will be well. And then you just get that little bit greedy when you get to the end and think, you know what, these tea leaves are mine, I'm sorry, you know, but what about the children and their toys? It's like, this tea leaves are mine, the children will have to wait.
Won't somebody please think of the children?
And then you lose because you donated the least to charity by $5. Literally just $5 because you got that little bit too greedy. And it can catch you unawares, and it doesn't feel horrible or punishing when it does. Well, okay, it feels horrible, but in a fun way. You're like, oh man, I can't believe it. And, you know, it's in a good fun way. It hits you. It's not like you get to the end and then you get punished by that aspect, and you're like, oh, that ruined the game for me. Oh, that sucks. You know, nobody's moping about it or anything. It's a cool mechanic, and I want to see it in more games, please. Because honestly, this isn't a mechanic I do see in a lot of games, frankly. I mentioned 2 already at the start. Does anybody know any other games where there's an elimination mechanic for doing the least of something or the most of something at the end of the game? Because if so, can you put it in the comments, please? Because I'd like to check these games out. Haben Gut is a really cool stock market game. I mean, it is super simple, easy to play, easy to teach, quick to play, quick to learn. You know, the components, I mean, other than little niggles like paper money, but I mean, it keeps the price point down, so you know what, I'm fine with paper money if you're going to make it a cheap game. It's still nicely illustrated, it's still got nice colour in that everywhere. The game is just a wonderful little package. You know, it does the job. It knows what it wants to do, throws in a little twist with the charity board to make it a bit more exciting than just simply buying low and selling high, but there's still good options on your turn. You have to care what other players are doing, you have to watch what they're buying and selling, because that will influence which cards you use to manipulate the stock market, so there is a good amount of interaction here in the sense that I'm not directly screwing you over, but I need to concentrate what the board is doing, so this isn't a solitaire game by any means. I really enjoy this. This is kind of on the level of, you know, in fact, I prefer this to Stockpile in a sense. Stockpile is a really cool game, but this one is easier to teach. It's quicker to get to the table and quicker to play, but it doesn't replace something like Stockpile. Stockpile is a very different game mechanically. I'm just trying to give you an idea of what sort of games this kind of reminds me of. You know, light stock market manipulation with a little bit of a twist, a little bit of insider dealing, if you will, because you have some information that other people don't. That's the fun part of these type of games for me. When you start going into 18xx territory, City of the Big Shoulders, and all these like really massive games with the shares, that's when I start losing a bit of care and focus. You know, you can cross the line. This one doesn't get anywhere near that line. It stays firmly behind it and gives me a really good, solid package. You know, is it the best game ever? No, but it's certainly deserving, I think, of a 9 out of 10. This is a game that I will happily pull out and play, you know, for an hour with 3 or 4 people particularly. It's just the fact that I can't really think of anything I would consider to be that bad about it. There are small niggles. It's not a game that I would say play twice in a row. It doesn't have a huge amount of replayability in a sense that there's not like you get different shares or different cards, but depending how the cards come out each game can influence how things go. But yeah, you're really playing the market and the players as opposed to having, oh, I've got character abilities and stuff like that. But I think this is still deserving of a seal of distinction for me. It's a good price point, good solid game, proof that some older games can still cut it in today's market. It's not all about the new hotness sometimes. Sometimes you just gotta take a concept, streamline it, make it cool, make it simple, but give a little bit of depth to what options you're doing and not make it autopilot, and these things can work. So honestly, I urge you to give this one a try, particularly if this is your theme. It's solid for a 9 out of 10. So that's it for me on this episode of the Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please remember to thumb it up on YouTube, but thumb it up on Board Game Geek when I put the review on there. Of course, check out more content on the show, including other reviews I've done lately, like Planet Unknown and Moon and Mindbug, etc. I'm doing a lot of reviews lately because of all the UK Games Expo content. But remember, as always, regardless of how much you're willing to donate to charity, it's still only a game. Just think of the children, and bye for now.